Hi everyone, in today's video we're taking a look at the Canon EOS R6 and seeing if it's the best option for video shooters. That's right, in today's video we're taking a look at the EOS R6. Now if you follow my channel, you've seen a couple of months ago when Canon announced the R6 and R5 at their launch event, I actually did a reaction video just to break down a few of the key specs and information that they gave out. I wasn't sure at that time which one I was going to go with. I definitely went with the R6 because for me it's just enough for what I want to do for videos, but we're going to get into that in just a second. Either way, this is an overview of the R6 and what I think about it 2 months after having it. Well, the first thing we have to acknowledge is the specs, why I chose this camera and why the specs are important. Well, this does 4K in 60 frames, which is great if you want to do slight slow-mo and still get that beautiful 4K quality. It also does 1080 in 120 frames per second, and that essentially allows you to go even further into the slow-mo, but you're losing a bit of quality. It has a recording codec of 10-bit 422, which allows you to have beautiful colors, especially the codecs that Canon uses. I just have a feeling of confidence. I just point the camera. I might have to do a little bit of touch-up for the skin tones on my editing software, but all in all, the colors and the images out of the camera are great from the start. If you're looking into color, you can also take a look at the C-Log that Canon offers with this camera. It has one option of C-Log. I've used it once or twice. I don't really use it. That's not part of my shooting habits. I usually shoot at 4K 30 frames and shoot in a regular picture profile, neutral, as flat as I can without C-Log, and then just touch up the skin tones a little bit. Honestly, that gives me enough information to do whatever I want after that in Final Cut. I know that C-Log will probably give me a bit more leeway, but honestly, I don't need it, so I just don't use it. Another thing that is interesting about this camera is the IBIS, in-body image stabilization. This camera actually has it for pretty much the first time ever in a mirrorless camera from Canon. You actually get a stabilization for the sensor, which means that not only your lens could be stabilized, but the sensor as well. This is especially interesting for video shooters because you actually have something that stabilizes your shot. I know that for a long time, I didn't have image stabilization in the body of my camera, and my favorite lens that I love shooting with is a 24-70 f2.8 Mark II from Canon. It just didn't have stabilization. So I was left with very jittery shots and not able to capture the moment properly. Now the IBIS actually does a decent job at stabilizing the image even without image stabilization in the lens. For fun, I also picked up the kit lens that came with the camera as the 24-105 f4 to 7.1. It's definitely not the best lens. It's actually a pretty bad lens if you ask me, comparing it to most of my other lenses, but you know what, it does the job when you need to get that shot and that's the only lens you have available. It has the option of having stabilization built into the lens, and it also has the focus control ring that can be customized to whatever you like. So this is part of the new RF mounts, and I'm currently using the 24-70 f2.8, my favorite lens, with the RF to EF adapter. And that's usually how I work, but this is a great backup lens. And at the same time, if I need that lens for something else, then I can throw this onto the R6 and it still does a pretty decent job. So let's jump right into the pros and cons. Well, the pros are the skin tones and the colors look tremendous. I have very little work to do in my editing program or software afterwards. I just basically throw the clips in and they work. And that's the beauty of working with a Canon camera, is the images look great right out of the camera. It does require a slight touch-up for skin tones sometimes, but the codecs are so easy to work with that it's really not a hassle. I just copy-paste those settings most of the time for all of my clips, and I get something that results into a really nice image quality like you're seeing here. Another thing that's super important for me is autofocus. As much as I have a manual focus option with this lens, and I could just, rack focus when I need to, autofocus allows me to have the confidence to just throw the camera on a tripod like I'm doing now, talk into it, and know with confidence that it's going to follow my face. And if I get closer or further, it'll take care of that for me. It has very good active tracking. It has a very good autofocus in general. And of course, sometimes it gets a little jittery in low light situations and just in general with a lot of movement. But all in all, I really can't complain about it, especially when you come from a kit that doesn't necessarily have autofocus or good autofocus to begin with. Another thing that's great is that you can touch the focus on the touchscreen. And this is a key feature for me because I usually shoot handheld and I could just touch the focus right away. So the item is there. Let's say I want to do a rack focus. I just touch, boom, straight to the item that I want to focus on. and you call it a day. It's not complicated. And that's what I love about this camera. It doesn't need to be complicated. It just works. Another cool feature that I do use often, especially when I use this camera for photos, but also for videos, is the remote app. Now, the remote app is basically an app you can download on your phone or on your iPad. And what it does is it allows you to basically control the camera from a distance. So pretty much all the features that you're able to control from the camera, I'm talking about white balance, I'm talking about ISO, shutter speed, aperture, all that stuff controlled from your phone. This is especially cool when you have the camera in a remote location, or a remote spot, I mean, when it's up on a C-stand or you're doing an overhead shot and it's not easy to access it, or you want to minimize the movement or vibrations because you're shooting something and you don't want the camera to vibrate too much. Well, this is great. You just use the app, click on the record button, and you're good to go. Now, jumping right into the cons, well, as I mentioned, the app is great for some situations, but it's not ideal. It's not a perfect app. It's honestly not great. The layout is a bit off. It's a bit slow, and every time you exit the app, you need to connect again to the camera's Wi-Fi and then open the app. It's a bit of a hassle, but all in all, it does the job quite well. But I know that some other companies have better apps. For example, I used to shoot Panasonic, and they actually had an app that was a bit more user-friendly and, in my opinion, nicer in terms of aesthetics. Right, so one of the main cons, and probably the reason why you're watching this video, is to know about the overheating problems. There's been a lot of speculations about if this camera overheats. Is it an issue? Can you still work with it? And to answer your question, it does overheat. It does overheat sometimes. And so what I mean by that is, at a certain point when you're recording for long periods of times in specific resolutions, you will have a problem with overheating. The camera will tell you, well, at this point, I need this much time to recuperate, and it'll allow you to record for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes at a time. It won't allow you to do a full recording up to, I don't know, an hour or so. You won't be able to. Does it actually stop you from working? Well, at the beginning, I was trying to record a video, and yes, it did stop me from working. I wasn't able to actually get the full length of video that I wanted. I had to stop recording, put the camera aside, and come back to shooting a few minutes later. It did stop my workflow, and it became a really big problem, to a point where I was concerned that I had to maybe return the camera or contact customer service. I really was worried that I had made a bad decision. And then they came out with firmware 1.1. It completely solved the overheating problem, for me at least. You have to understand that it's not the actual camera overheating that turns it off. It's a mechanism that protects the camera from overheating. And so that mechanism is very sensitive. And as soon as it feels like it might be overheating, it immediately turns off the camera, or at least shortens the time that you can record with it. The 1.1 firmware allows you to kind of override that and record for longer periods of time. It'll still tell you that you'll need to turn off the camera because it's overheating, but it'll take a lot longer. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been shooting with it for a couple of months now, and you know what? Since the new firmware update, I've had no issues whatsoever. So for that, I'm very thankful, because overheating is, for me at least, no longer a problem. Right, so the big question, who is this camera for? Well, I'd recommend it for people that need to shoot promo videos, videos that basically are short length. You go in, you get a few B-roll shots, you get that beautiful image quality. You need to shoot a few slow-mo shots. You have that capability with this camera. His big brother, the R5, has 8K, which is nice, and if you need it, that's your only option in terms of that lineup. If you don't need 8K, definitely go with the R6, because you're gonna be saving a ton of money, and at the same time, you're getting a very, very good image quality. Do not be afraid of the fact that it's 4K 60 frames. As far as I'm concerned, that's all I need. 4K 120 would have been nice, but between you and I, that's fine. I'm very satisfied with the 1080 120, and you know what? The quality is impeccable. Here's a little clip of a shot that I did in 1080 120, and it mixed in beautifully with the rest of the video that was in 4K 60. So promo video shooters, because they're short length videos and you get a few shots, and the clips that you're filming are usually within 20 to 30 seconds max. I would not necessarily recommend this for event shooters, so wedding videographers or events that need to carry on long periods of time, because obviously the camera might overheat on you. And the last thing you want in the middle of the wedding scene with the entrance to the bride is your camera overheating, right? So do not consider this the best option for you if you are in live events that need workhorses of cameras. this might disappoint you. Another recommendation that I'd make is if you are looking for a low, quote unquote, budget camera that gives you an amazing image quality and you're looking for multiple kits to basically match that image. So let's say you're doing music videos or multiple angle interviews or shoots that need basically the same camera. That's ideal, by the way, when you're shooting those types of videos because you can match the color perfectly. Well, this camera is cheap enough for a professional group of videographers to have, let's say, 2-3 of them and still be able to get a super clean image and have 3 of the same image. And that's key, especially when you're filming those multiple angles, because you don't want to basically go from one angle to the other and the image looks completely off. So having multiple kits of an R6 is a great option for those that need it. Right, so last but not least, the cost. How much does this camera cost? Well, the R6 body only in US dollars is $2,500. So $2,500 for the body. If you're looking into Canadian dollars, it's $3,500 for the body and $3,800 for the kit with the 24-105. This is probably your best bet if you are looking into the kit because you get that lens and it's a great backup lens. And honestly, for 200 extra bucks Canadian, just get it. It's worth it. It's a great failsafe. Now you're probably looking at this camera and comparing it to the R5 and you might think, oh, I'm getting the R6 because I'm settling. It's not a settle. You are getting an amazing camera. If the R5 didn't exist, this would probably still be my first choice. Now, the R5 is nice. It has 8K and 4K 120 and a few different features here and there. All in all, it's not something that I personally need, and it's definitely not worth the difference in money, about $1,500 US dollars in difference. So R5, we're looking at prices of $3,900 for the body only. Canadian, that comes out to about 5,400 Canadian for an R5. Those are big boy dollars. I mean, $5,500, $5,400 for a camera is a lot of money. And so the R6 at 3,500 Canadian makes a lot more sense, at least for me. And at the end of the day, it does everything that it needed for. Well, that was it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a big old thumbs up. Leave me a comment in the section below. And hey, I'll see you next time. Peace!